I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. It is a summery day here in New York City. It's going to hit the 80s. It's a little balmy. Andrew Kuo, how long are your Knicks shorts today?
I'm in my TJ Ford era, so they're going down to like where my socks end. It's still cool. There's airflow, as they say, but feeling good, looking amazing. It is the summer. I love talking about the weather. It's balmy. It feels appropriate.
I saw that in women's trend forecasting, bloomers are apparently coming back into style. In some ways, your TJ Ford shorts are kind of like bloomers if you would gather them at the hem there.
It's been like I've been wearing these TJ Ford shorts for as long as TJ Ford has been around. So it's like 3 or 4 cycles of this fit. I don't know. It's like burgers, right? They can only like vacillate between big and smash. So what can you do with basketball shorts? They're either big or small. So I just wait until the big ones come back, which they're not quite there yet.
They're on the way, though.
Yeah, it's a matter of time.
I mean, maybe this is just my limited agility speaking, but when I put on those baggy shorts, I feel a little more streamlined. It would seem to be the other way around, but I feel like the swishy nylon makes me feel like I'm lower to the ground than I actually am.
Yeah, and it's kind of gaming the system, right? Because big shorts, when they're out of fashion, are acceptable. Tiny shorts, when they're out of fashion, no bueno.
Right. I mean, this is darting a little too close to the sun, being basketball chat this early. But it was derogatory Stockton shorts for the longest time. And then shorts got shorter and shorter and shorter. And now they're going back the other direction for sure.
Well, revealing athletic wear segues perfectly into our first topic, which is wrestling.
That's a masterful pile driver of a segue. So I went out to Los Angeles for the Sukeban women's Japanese wrestling event, Friends of the Pod. That was the third event. They did the first one in New York City. The second one was in Miami, and this was in Los Angeles, where 15, 20 professional women's wrestlers come in from Japan, and they do an event, and there was DJs, and super fun. I had a great time. So shout out to the Sukeban crew. There was a lot of actors, people in music.
Name names, paint the picture. Let's go.
Diplo in the building.
I just saw his AD, right? Diplo. Where is he? Is he not producing hits and just watching wrestling now?
I think he just, I don't know if it's a hotel or if his own home. It was an Architectural Digest, his estate in Jamaica, right?
Something like that, yeah. It was fine. It was annoying. He's annoying on purpose, but he's been around forever.
But the house looked nice, like jungle brutalism.
Yeah, I mean, he's got impeccable taste, as we know, but he's not making hits anymore by choice, right? Is he out of the hit making game and into the wrestling game?
This could be true. You never know with people who do Las Vegas sets. It's just another parallel universe.
It's a money-making universe.
That's what I mean. It's parallel, but there's money being made.
It's like European, right? Like you can exist as a person who has done a wonderful thing for longer than you can in New York. I want to talk about wrestling, but I bumped into a friend of the pod who got internet famous doing a podcast show, or a online show, rather. And he was like, he's younger, and he was like, yeah, I'm tired. How long do I got to keep this up? Do I have to like be here 5 nights a week talking to people? and he's relatively famous. Like 4 people had come up to him in the course of an hour, and I was like, you stop that show for 6 months and everyone will forget about you, which sucks if you want to stay relevant, but it's kind of a relief if you want to disappear, or just go to Vegas and do the show there.
I mean, this is kind of the concept of audience capture, which we've talked about in the past, where your audience just demands more and more and more and more, and you can either give it to them or not. And if you're fortunate, like say Diplo, you can contextualize that and say, well, I actually don't have to keep doing 25 tour dates and going around the world. I can just go out to Vegas and be extremely wealthy doing 2 gigs a week, and I'll just zip back and forth, and that's all I have to do. I can work on music, I can do whatever I want, but I no longer am indebted to the ravenous appetites of my original audience.
And then that comes with a price, right? Because then he's no longer famous, and he's a man who loves to be famous. So like there is a tax to that. If you stop making stuff and just start doing your Celine Dion, you're not going to be at the Met Gala. He probably is anyway. But like you're at wrestling events and people are like, there's Diplo. If like Olivia Rodrigo showed up to Sukeban, you'd be like, yo, that shit was crazy.
Let's see. Yeah, some other actors there, some other musicians. It was cool. I thought after seeing the first 2, there's a definite learning curve where the events are getting, the wrestling is getting stronger. It was good to begin with because these are pros, but I felt like the women really were. They really elicited a great response from the crowd on this one.
This may sound confusing to people who don't know what Sukeban is. Can you step back and say what kind of wrestling is this and who is this for?
So it's Joshi Wrestling, which is women's professional wrestling in Japan, has been around for a long time. So this is an American promotion company that's bringing it here. So when they're in the United States, they have their American names and identities and crew affiliations and stables and things like that. And then some of these wrestlers are known in Japan under other names and have had long, illustrious careers. Some of them are younger. It's a huge, wide range. So when they come here, they are, it's tag team events. They have a championship belt and things like that. Yeah, they're more sort of like live sport events versus necessarily the lore. And I'm sure there are people who are versed in it, but thus far it's more like a party. You show up, you watch wrestling, you have some drinks, you listen to some music, there's a DJ. It's just kind of a spectacle, and I think they've been great.
And the framing, expertly, is important, right? Like whoever, our friends, our family who do this, know how to make it a thing, right? Because Sukeban could be for a specific audience, but this is for someone else. For example, Oral Schmidt, a downtown artist, did the new logo. Olympia Latan is the art director, right? It has connections to a localized downtown scene as opposed to like a New Jersey backyard wrestling vibe.
Right. It caters to Joshi wrestling fans who know these artists, these performers, these athletes, however you want to describe them, but it's also for people who are not necessarily fans of that genre and are being introduced to it via, as you said, the cultural intersection of whether it's fashion or music or just sort of downtown mayhem.
Right. I always saw wrestling growing up as like a third rail thing, sort of like fantasy sports, As you know, I love fantasy sports and I do it, I enjoy it, but I know it's something that I can't really talk to someone about if they're not into it. I think there's a lot of people who like Renaissance fairs, steampunk, and I'm just like, I don't get it. But there's a lot of you, and this is incredible, and I want to know. And it's interesting trying to take that. Like, can you make fantasy sports cool? It's like, well, you have to guarantee certain people were involved that were community approved. You would have to package it so it felt different. It didn't feel like ESPN.com/fantasy. It would have to present itself as different. And I think there's like a joy in that, right? Like unleashing wrestling to a larger or a smaller audience.
Yeah, I think this fantasy sports comparison is funny because we're at a time when gambling is just seeping into sports at all levels. And they're kind of the same thing. It's just that when they turned it from nerdy into socially acceptable, they just turned it into gambling. Like, oh no, this is gambling. You're not really doing fantasy sports. Oh, it's called daily fantasy sports, but what you're doing is gambling.
Same with
Like
esports, right?
That's fine.
It went from video games to esports to gambling.
Right. Exactly. Like gambling is a nefarious enough endeavor that will always be cool. You can have everybody on TV talking about gambling lines. If they say, for your starting fantasy sports lineup today, you might want to, insert, Lively. What are you doing, you dork? And he's like, over under on Lively rebounds 7.
Yeah. And it's like, before you mock my esports fixation, have you seen the movie Rounders? I am KGB until he loses. Then I'm Edward Norton. I forget. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of amazing. I saw some pictures. Our friend of the pod, Atiba Jefferson, shot some stuff. It was a big New York moment in LA this weekend. Did you go to Alon Levitt's photo show?
I missed that because it was right leading into Sukuban.
Oh, it's the same night? That's bad planning by both, because that's a wealth of an audience being split down the middle.
Essentially overlapped at
brutal.
the same time. And there was a lot. Daniel Arnold had a photo show on Saturday. There was a Milk Studios party that I went to, ran into a lot of New York people. This sounds like the horrible New York navel gazing that we do on a regular basis. I went to LA and I saw New York people.
Oof. I mean, LA is... but people from LA do the same thing here, right? Whether that be shows or like musical performances. Sukuban should be an LA-based thing because it's so close to Japan, right? That I feel like people might fly from Japan to see it in LA.
There were some people who did.
Yeah, it's not bad. I have not traveled in a while. I won't travel in a while. I have a theory that my friends who are on planes constantly have been on planes constantly for 25, 30 years maybe, have changed biologically. Do you, like, between time zones?
I think you need to describe this a little more. I'm with this theory in terms of let's have it unveiled.
Well, this gets into stuff that I sound crazy when I talk about it. It's like bacteria, biomes, like sleeping, different things that kind of create the sum, which is your personality. But if someone's always tired or if someone's always recovering on a cellular and just a vibe level, that becomes their personality. So it's like, oh, I'm jet lagged. I'm like, you've been jet lagged for 20 years. This is just your personality. Like you're not never jet lagged. It's sort of like a drunk being like, this isn't the real me when I'm sober. I'm like, but I don't know you sober. And I think I have wonderful friends who are always on planes, but they're tired. They kind of like can't sit still for longer than a couple weeks. Their brains are wired to constantly be moving. And it's like, the cliche of these movies starring George Clooney about up in the air. It's like their foothold on the idea of home and long-term relationships is kind of skewed by the fact that they are a million miles up in the air shooting across the globe constantly.
Do you view this as specifically tied to air travel, or could this have been similarly experienced on stagecoaches or
it's air travel,
traveling salesmen or whatever? Like, why is it exclusive or at least more
because you can
prominent?
Cross time zones faster, right? The red eyes are crazy ideas. It's hard to pull off a red eye vibe with a stagecoach. or even a car, a Cybertruck. But yeah, I mean, switching time zones is kind of crazy. It's like, hey, I'm living in the future or I'm living in the past. I'm like one day behind or ahead of you. That's weird, right? And I used to have a friend who had a store in Japan and a store in New York, and their crew was on a red-eye plane once every 2 weeks, back and forth, 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there, where they knew the staff. They turned into their friends, the stewardesses, the pilots, all that, because they were on the same flights. And their grasp of reality was so skewed that they had to close the shop because they were like losing years of their life into the ether, kind of. It was interesting to hear them describe it. They're like, there's days I can't account for. Like, what day is it? And I'm like, right, because you're constantly juggling the idea of time. I don't know. I just noticed my friends kind of getting worn out by extensive travel.
Well, right. I mean, we know people who, especially, let's say, like traveling DJs, who just do gigs all the time, bouncing back and forth all over the place. And it may also be like a product of the repetition of that cycle, right? Within even this lily padding around different time zones and countries and languages where there's this impermanence. And it's like, okay, it's airport, cab, hotel, gig, hotel, cab, airport, ad nauseum, right? But it's also the, for lack of a less cliche term, the Groundhog Day of that process too. What I mean is that there are people who travel all the time who may live in a much more linear style than the people you're describing.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it depends. Styles make fights, but like, even, is it a disposition? Is the travel the thing that shapes the person, or is the person inclined to be like this? Because I kind of want to bring up friend of the pod, Nicole Goodkind's tweet that I loved. She is a friend of ours and also a reporter for CNN, whatever. She says, New York City has its own time zones. 9:30 a.m. is a mid-afternoon in Park Slope and early morning in the West Village, which is kind of an amazing idea, right? Like, because
Wait, run that back one more time.
New York City has its own time zones. 9:30 a.m. is mid-afternoon in Park Slope and early morning in the West Village.
Okay, that checks out.
Right? Everyone kind of is like, yeah, we understand this. And I think our brains my brain, maybe when I read this, was like, oh yeah, because I moved from the Lower East Side for decades into Bed-Stuy, and it's such a different feeling and vibe that 10 a.m. here feels like 5 p.m. where I used to live, and 5 p.m. where I used to live felt like the day was just starting. And I don't know whether that be about commerce, about how the people live there and where they're coming from and what age they are and what culture it is, right? Like, Bed-Stuy's not a bar culture. Bed-Stuy's kind of like a walk your dog, now in 2024, walk your dog and go home culture. Lower East Side is lit.
I'm trying to think of a way to talk about this concept, which I do enjoy, that isn't just about where do parents live. You know, I think that one's just the most predictable take. You're like, well, of course Park Slope is like that because people are taking their kids to school, and that starts at like 7 or whatever. And of course, in neighborhoods where you have younger people who are going out at night, the day may start later. I don't even know if that's true for the West Village, I gotta say, because there's a lot of kids over there.
Sure,
there's a lot
but
of parents.
there's a lot of families in Chelsea, Upper East Side, Upper West Side, Murray Hill. But those all have different feels, right?
No, I mean, I like this concept. I'm trying to strip away the natural biases that having, like, oh, it's a real family neighborhood. It's like Park Slope. I don't know. I don't spend time in Park Slope, so I can only associate it with like its reputation as being like the most family-based neighborhood in New York City for generations, if not, now Bed-Stuy or wherever you want to describe it. But that was always Park Slope's reputation going back to like the 90s.
And it's the style of architecture, right? Is like, yo, my God, I wanted to talk about this. I spent an afternoon in Williamsburg. The last time I spent an afternoon in Williamsburg a few years ago, I did the same thing on this show. I'm like, yo, I went to Williamsburg. It is so whack. It's hard to put into words. And
No. Can you try?
yeah. And also beautiful and new and usable, but like, so they built vertical, right? Like along the water, many living spaces were created vertically. Domino Factory. I believe that's like an office building. Kind of beautiful if you've seen it recently. They kept the facade of the Domino sugar plant where they used to have like hardcore shows up there. So dangerous and weird and fun. And then they set back the building inside of it, and it's like a modern glass office building, which is like, it looks good, man. And then there's a park there with like hundreds, maybe thousands of apartments built up into the sky, and it's changed the feel of that whole place. Like, I walked by a private pickleball court with like new shit everywhere. There was, what do you call it, cornhole, where you throw that bean bag through the hole next to tacos that no one was eating, like, but I had a great time sitting on the grass once every 3 years, being like, I get to look at downtown New York. Like, this doesn't suck. Like, I remember the Domino Factory days when it was a shell, and it was not fun over there. So it's hard to figure out how old I am and what I want, but it is extremely whack. Like, it doesn't have much of a life, sort of like Soho.
I actually do agree with you that the new Domino condos or whatever they are,
Yeah.
In that building that used to be the sugar factory, they did a nice job. It looks cool.
Yo, it's nice. Yeah, it's cool
Yeah.
as hell.
They built this huge sort of arced glass aperture over the top. It's still got the Domino sign. It looks really nice.
Yeah.
If you're going to turn that into a condo, they pretty much nailed it. Now, whatever that means in terms of the price point and for traffic and all those other civic ills that may come along with this, I can't speak on that. It does look good though.
Yeah.
And also, as opposed to the buildings around it, which were high rises that were created from scratch, those generally aren't that interesting. The one that has the hole kind of cut out in the center, there's at least a little creativity there. But the only one that looks actually cool, in my opinion, is probably the Domino building.
Yeah, I mean, I guess where you fall, it could be a conversation about like affordable housing. I'm not sure these fall into that jurisdiction, but more places to live is better for New York City in general. Controversial, whatever. Argue about that later. But the glossing over, I don't believe in the, when people talk about gentrification, I don't really believe all of those terms, but I believe some. And some neighborhoods definitely have the city's vision behind it. And Williamsburg and Greenpoint along the water have been carved out with these high rises that is pretty like stunning. If you're a 21-year-old now, it's hard to describe what Williamsburg was. It would be hard to describe to them, right? Like, and it would be hard to support the idea that it was better. It's like, well, I don't really go there. There's like name brand shops. There's people not shopping, but the shopping is there. And there's a lot of people living with dogs, and this demographic seems like they would have lived near Wall Street or Murray Hill before, but now they get the benefits of being on the water in a new place. How is this better or worse? How is this worse than when Club Lux was around? I'm like, it's not. People change. Like, you don't want the dingy the restaurants and bars that we used to go to still be around, like, because we don't go to them anymore.
Well, that neighborhood in particular, it's very hard to sort of pin down at this point, because in the way that you were describing, okay, this is what Bed-Stuy is now. or this is what it feels like, at least. This is what Park Slope has traditionally represented. This is what Greenpoint, whatever, however you want to talk about these Brooklyn neighborhoods, Lower East Side, East Village, West Village. Williamsburg transformed in such a profound way that it doesn't actually stand or represent anything. There aren't even the like vestigial bones of what it was in the way that Soho, you could say, well, Soho is this, artsy bohemian area that now you can see this is why it had that appeal, even though now it's full of these expensive boutiques and shopping. You still get the history there. Williamsburg, nah. There's nothing. There's not even an inkling of why it was cool at one point and why when you look at it now.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the Williamsburg effect before, and it's interesting you brought up Soho because the architecture didn't change there. There were like these metal buildings that made lofts that New York is famous for, and you don't want to subdivide them up, and it attracts a certain kind of clientele or occupancy. Williamsburg is new. Like, I was walking around, I'm like, everything is new here. Like, I walked by the gallery that notoriously, I don't know, you remember that story, the Ryan McGinley story, where they were in the cab and there was like a theft of a photo. I believe it was Kenneth Capello's photo, and one of our homies went to jail. It was in the New York Times, all this stuff. I walked by that gallery, I'm like, I don't recognize this anymore. And that's good. Like, I don't think that was 20 years ago. We should. It's not a wasteland of like artist occupied like lofts, but kind of like warehouses. Now it's just glass and brunch. And the Williamsburg effect is talking about something else. It's not talking about this. It's talking about something before that.
What's interesting about Williamsburg is that there are certainly those of us who were around and experienced it in a more, let's just say, bohemian fashion, however you want to describe that, right? But because of how it changed and how and the rapidity with which it became what we see today, there really is not that much nostalgia for it because it became so perverse. Every now and then you'll run into someone and be like, oh man, Williamsburg was great. But it's almost like our nostalgia for it has been changed by the annihilation of what it was. That, you know what I mean? Like, you can sit there if someone was around and say, you remember when we go to Turkey's Nest and you get this, margarita to go, and you go and sit around McCarran Park and it was just a bunch of, pale flesh with stick and poke tattoos, and there was no tourists or babies or people playing sports, and there'd be some,
and
some
we were,
Latin
those were the
American
enemy.
people.
We were the enemy then. Like,
Exactly, right. And be like, there's some Latin Americans playing volleyball. And then you go over here and you'd be like, here's the older Polish crowd. They would stay on the side of the park that's now by Hell Square 7, over by the Five Leaves. That was like the Polish side of the park. And that was all it was. And I'm not even saying McCarran is the embodiment of it, but just these ideas of like McCarran Park, Bedford Avenue. Now you just like sneer at them. Like, Bedford Avenue, they're opening a new taco spot. And you're like, really? I kind of want to go to that place, but it's on Bedford and North 5th. Are you fucking kidding me?
and this
I can't go over there.
Yeah, and this kind of idea, this feeling is something we talk about all the time on the show, but it's kind of like crystallizing for me a little bit, especially with like our buddy Sam Hine at GQ wrote an article about the death of merch, and you were just out in LA for, our buddy Alon Levitt had a photo show from, I believe, the years, photographs from like 2002 to 2005, I forget, but Iraq heavy, rest in peace to our friends. But it was that era, and like, we are officially, every generation goes through the same process, and I think it's acceptable for people of our age to look back and be like, okay, we can put this in a box and put a bow on it. That was lame. This is good. We're going to represent represent it as history now, that we can be the historians or custodians of. And this happens in basketball all the time. We'll get to that in a second. But like, it kind of makes me feel like we have a choice to make at some point in every generation's life cycle, which is like, do you want to look backwards, stay in the present, or look forwards? You have this choice because you are given the agency to look backwards now and be like, I think this is over because I have lived lives and I've seen stuff be over. I declare this is over in ways you cannot because I was at Turkey's Nest. I don't know. It kind of bums me out. When I talked to Sam about it for the GQ article, I was like, merch is not over. I think it's comes and goes in waves, but the minute something pops up we care about again, I'm going to want that tee. I'm going to want those socks. I'm going to want that mug. But I can see someone of our age being like, I'm not interested, so it's no longer valid.
Yeah, the merch story was interesting because not only are you the merch lord,
Barely.
you get to say, you know, whether merch lives or dies. Like it is
Right.
by your fickle hand, you know, determines the fate of merch.
That's right. That's what they say.
But the waves of merch are interesting, and without even getting into all the specifics, I remember maybe like 10 years ago, like one of my friends, we would crack jokes about creating merch for institutional places that didn't have it. We even talked about this with me and you sometimes. Like, why don't we just create merch for places that just don't make it? You know, because everyone wants merch from these like institutional New York restaurants or brands. And this was when people first started wearing like Odeon hats around and stuff. You know, we're saying maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago. It was a thing. People were just finding these merch items that were very much tied to like New York culture. And like, why don't we just make them and create them? And then that sort of happened. And then there's been this whole wave of like New York centric merch. Then you had like high end streetwear.
New York basketball.
That's really the only merch that anyone should be wearing, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, as someone who is the merch lord, the king of all merch mogging,
as they say. Right.
merch mogger himself, would you say that like there is this cycle that I'm describing, and like where is it now?
I think so. It's just a couple people doing this, right? And when I say a couple, I mean like a dozen. It's expensive to make merch, but I remember, you know, like my origin with my interest with this stuff was like, oh, this band doesn't have t-shirts. I have paint. I have a blank t-shirt. Just write the logo on my shirt and it'll last forever. I still have t-shirts I painted when I was like 14 years old. And like the DIY thing, I think, is a term we attach to the 90s, but it's still relatively important now, especially with the internet. And just do it, right? And I remember when Odeon, everyone started wearing those Odeon hats. I'm like, well, this has kind of been in style for a long time, but the means to production have become easier, and people have design software on their computers. And someone could execute something in a quicker fashion, and it's not as intimidating anymore. I mean, I'm always just pick up a paintbrush or a marker and draw it on your shirt. I love that stuff still. And to say the premise of the article maybe started with Wes Lang's Yeezus merch, and it really blew up, and I recognize that. I think that's a correct beginning point for a thought. I think Sam did a great job with it. But to me, that's not where I would have started. I would have started with this is not a Fugazi shirt, because that's my personal history. But that starts way before with Grateful Dead stuff. And in the article, I found it so fascinating. And it kind of refers to the conversation we were having about Williamsburg. There was homies on there who were like, oh, I used to wear Rancid shirts, and why would I talk to someone who was wearing Erewhon? Because I don't want to talk about Justin Bieber. I'm like, I did not want to talk to someone wearing a Rancid shirt. If you were wearing an MTV era punk ska band shirt, I love Rancid, But they were already over by then. So us being snobs were like, have you heard Operation Ivy? And this was a whole era, right, of different kind of librarians. And now if I saw someone wearing an Erewhon t-shirt, I'd be like, I bet you know who Operation Ivy is. And I bet you love Operation Ivy because information is just everywhere now. There's no subculture of anything. And that's why I love all these third rail pockets like wrestling, like fantasy, or Ren fairs. Because those are the things everyone's like, I'm not fucking with that. I'm like, that feeling's familiar to me. That feeling was merch back in the day. Now it's just a free-for-all, and I love merch more than ever. I think sort of like music and sports, it gets better and better every year because that's just how evolution works. You may not like the transition from fish growing feet into, I don't know, lizards, but it is a notable thing that is in its like kind of puberty phase. And right now it's like, yeah, people are tired of merch. Kanye kind of betrayed everyone. Everyone's 40 tired of their Yeezus t-shirts. Of course you are. You've aged out of them. So we just got to wait.
And yet everyone says Zuck is snatched now when he puts on a chain and a little bit of merch.
I mean, there's layers to the kind of snobbiness here, right? Because he looks more acceptable to more people. But the people who are trying to figure out if burgers are supposed to be skinny or fat will forever be chasing that. And then meanwhile, Zuck's just enjoying his hamburger.
I watched The Social Network on the plane out. Hadn't seen that in many years. Forgot how deeply unflattering it was. I remember that it was unflattering, but then watched it again. I was like, wow, it's a very, very harsh portrait of the Zuck man.
To various degrees of attention. I think I've seen that movie like 25 times. Sometimes I'll just put it on. I love that movie. I think it's perfect. I think Res Dog and his partner Atticus, I forget Finch. No, that's a character in To Kill a Mockingbird. But Atticus Ross. I think they like really nailed it. The only flaw of that movie I can conjure is like the breath that they breathe in cold weather looks like really fake. I was like, Fincher, what the hell, man? Like, you got to nail this a little bit better. But that is the best movie. It portrays Zuck not in a bad way, but in like a interestingly flawed way, right?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent movie. And I think of like that and ones that I've watched, other ones that I've watched with the same volume that you have on that one, like something like Moneyball.
For sure.
And
yeah,
throwing another movie into that mix, like the Big Short or whatever. These
Barton
films
Fink.
that are outside of the realm of Marvel, whatever. I'm not getting on a Scorsese rant here. I'm just saying, like, I could, but these movies that are about certain things that are just so perfectly done and rewatchable, even if they aren't something that's necessarily in your scope of direct interest, but is adjacent to it. Man, those are a treat. Not saying anything people don't know. I'm just saying those movies are so freaking good and so rewatchable.
Yeah, I want to have this Dune conversation with you because Dune 2, more Dunes. Because I know you haven't watched it fully, but I didn't love it. I love the first one, but I've watched the second one at least 7 times now on streaming, and I still don't love it. I think it's good. But it's so cool to have on because it's beautiful and the sounds are rad and the tenor is exactly what I like to have on. It's kind of intense, but the good guys win. I don't know. But it is one of those movies. I mean, Villeneuve. How many times have you seen Sicario 1?
10.
Yeah,
15.
man. That's also one of those movies. Kind of dark, right? Like, it's kind of gross at times, especially the opening scene, but fucking beautiful.
I mean, the scene of them crossing the border with the score by the Icelandic composer who passed away, and this
Right.
this
the
low
bass.
guttural bass. I may have mentioned this on the pod, but sometimes when I'm driving around, I'll put that on because it starts low and then crescendos, especially if I'm doing it and someone doesn't pay attention while I'm driving around with them. So we'll pull up to, say, a Wegmans in Rochester. Just as the beat starts rising, you look at that, and then there she is, the beast.
Man, you're a real minimalist because I also love that bass, but I want like double hi-hats, maybe quadruple hi-hats, maybe 16 times the hi-hats over it. You texted me your first night in LA and you were like, I'm at a party where Goldie's DJing. Can you talk about that?
Oh yeah, that was fun. He's he's that guy. I mean, maybe if you were, as you are, a true jungle enthusiast,
Not
there
really,
may be
but-
other ones in that category, but I'm just like jungle. I mean, Goldie, it was a Stussy party in an industrial area that was
As it is, yeah.
Boylan Heights, I think.
Oh my God, this is so scandalous, man. It was in Boylan Heights?
Does that mean anything to you?
Yeah, there was that very controversial takeover of that neighborhood, right?
I don't know. I don't pay attention to LA news.
Yeah,
But this
Laurel
was
Owens,
this wasn't in a super industrial area, so it may or not be attached to what you're talking about. But I couldn't say for sure. But yeah, really far on the east side. Stussy party, not a huge, monstrous crowd. It was a lot of people there, but it wasn't some huge, there's hundreds of thousands of people lined up to hear jungle. The speakers
There
kept
never
going in
was.
and out. Speakers clipped. They'd stop. Everyone kind of chill for a little while, then go back on. He was in great spirits. He was really dancing around out there. So was A-Side, was cutting a rug. Fun party.
It's about time for his comeback. Metalheads for Nerds, like, divisive label. I loved it, but some heads are just like, ugh, not that shit. Which is like a tiny, tiny sliver of debate that I fucking love. But yeah, I mean, I just had this argument with my friend the other week. I was like, I went back and listened to Platinum Breaks 2. I'm like, love it. Bangers. And they're like, that shit is like for meatheads, man. That is not real drum and bass. That is just, by that time that stuff came out, it was over. And I'm like, fair enough. I love this conversation. Let's have another beer. But Goldie's about time. It's about time for him to make some kind of comeback. But I don't know what this looks like. Like, what does the Fat Joe comeback look like? This is it, right? Maybe Goldie, does he still have gold fronts? Was he still rocking like Anthony Mason carved out images in his bleach blonde head?
He still has the gold fronts.
He has to keep them.
Absolutely. Those are for life.
Yeah.
And he was wearing Stussy, so what can you say?
I mean, Stussy, right? Like, this is what I was talking about with merch coming and going in waves. I mean, brands like Stussy and Supreme are not merch per se, but there was a whole wave of extra large X-Girl in the 90s that like kind of vanished and came back when James Jebbia started Supreme. So like, and now Supreme's kind of like shifting again and rumored to be for sale again. And I don't know, it'll survive. All this shit survives. Goldie's still DJing at Stussy parties.
You know what hasn't been surviving, Andrew? Some of your favorite musical artists' summer tours. There has been a raft of cancellations or postponements or certain dates being blacked out, however you want to say it. And these artists, of course, are amongst the ones that any listener to this pod knows are really in the Quo wheelhouse. J-Lo, Black Keys, Jonas Brothers, Justin Timberlake, Pink.
Huge
Are you
artists.
worried? Are you worried about the future of the arena concert performance?
Man, these are so expensive. And people, it's a real Schadenfreude fest, right? People are like, look at J-Lo, can't even sell seats. It's like embarrassing. I think SZA's having trouble. Metro Boomin and Future are also having trouble. It makes sense, right? Like, in kind of a complicated money time with recessions and not recessions. Like liquid money is different than like the S&P 500. So people aren't like, yo, I'm gonna like go to a NBA playoff game with my friend, and we're gonna drive in from New Jersey, Long Island, wherever, Westchester, pay for parking, have dinner. Our seats are decent, not the best. We're talking like $1,500, right? It's like, oh, I want a RJ Barrett jersey. Well, that's another $80. I want a double vodka soda. Well, that'll be $30. And these tours are just so expensive, as we're finding out. And you really have to capture someone's moment in order to pull this off. There's certain evergreen artists like Beyonce and obviously Taylor Swift. But I'm not sure Olivia Rodrigo could sustain this unless she makes more music. It's weird how we all turn on merch and how we all turn on the Jonas Brothers just in a second. And I think that's just age. I think time goes fast and life comes at you fast. And the people who would fill, I don't know, MetLife Stadium or even Madison Square Garden for Justin Timberlake, featuring Pink, featuring J-Lo, featuring Black Keys, probably all collectively are like, I'd rather go to Mexico City.
It's also probably one of those very, what's the term you describe? Something's very top heavy, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas like Taylor Swift, oh, you got to get those tickets. Beyonce, you got to get those tickets. You'll spend whatever it costs. That's going to a Knicks finals game.
Yeah.
You got to do it.
Yeah.
If you are that kind of fan and you have access to it, you spend the money. You don't even blink. Mm-hmm. Hey, we can get you 6th row seats, face value, Knicks playoffs, $800. Like, fuck it.
Billy Joel ass. Yeah.
Like, fuck it. That's a bargain.
Yeah.
You know what they're going for? That's a bargain. And people just say, I'm going to do it. Or they'll say, I'm going to go down to Philly, where it's a little bit cheaper, and I'm going to take over the stadium. I'm going to make the Dr. J wear a Willis Reed uniform statue. But
Benjamin
this idea,
Netanyahu just in his Dr. J jersey.
Exactly. But this idea of, you know, the must, this is the must attend event of the year. You have to do it. This doesn't apply to, say, Pink at this point. It may have at some point in her career trajectory when people said, "Oh,
Fergie.
Pink has the biggest songs out.
Yeah.
We've got to go see Pink." But that's not who she is now, and that's not who J-Lo is, and that's not who the Jonas Brothers are, or Justin Timberlake. They were, but they aren't now. And I don't know if as you said, the schadenfreude towards them is to say, "Hey, you guys are actually washed, and here's the evidence of it," or is it just that people like talking about them being failures? Yeah. But this isn't a group of people, at least the ones I described, that you would say, yeah, they should clearly be selling out arenas in the year 2024.
And what do you do with an artist's ego? Yeah, totally. It's just like, it's hard to just fade away as an artist. I don't know many superstar basketball players who are just like, my time is up. There are a few. You know, there's huge artists that just walk away. But there are the Carmelo Anthony's being like, I still got a season in me. All right, everyone come out. And when does that end? Kobe Bryant, right? Like, should have probably retired sooner. I don't know. And the Black Keys are what they are, right? And our attention spans are what they are. And I kind of lament like a peaceful death of art. Like, I think this is a technology discussion, but like just making 3 albums and them having be loved is like incredible. We don't have to be like, you suck now, because the Rolling Stones put out some shitty records. But we don't really do that with the Rolling Stones because they occupy a different generational mindset.
Well, right. I think your buddy Ghostface Killah,
love him,
just came out with a new album and made a song with Kanye. There was like a mild uptick in interest, a raised eyebrow, a curled ear in the direction of GFK. But ultimately, no one really cared. I read a review. They said it wasn't good. If they had said it was fantastic, I would have checked it out. Not to say that I give all the credence to any particular review. But once I heard that it just wasn't that good, that just lined up with whatever my preconceived notion of a Ghostface album in 2024 would be.
Yeah.
And, we know that there are artists who are from that generation that can still put out music that is at least palatable. And maybe this album is in that category. But it'll never change our perception of who he was from before.
Yeah.
We're not going to say, you know what, I don't really like Supreme Clientele anymore because Ghostface's new album didn't hit. And that's kind of what we're talking about when it's like, well, Williamsburg was fun back then, even if it's now an epithet, even if it's now a subject of mockery as this like vibeless, swagless place where you just walk around in your merch mogging.
Okay.
But it's not what it was, and that's not what J-Lo was, and that's not what Pink was, and that's not what merch was, and it's this idea of like, can you reinvent? And if you can't reinvent, or if you do reinvent, how does that change what you originally were?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I used to review shows for the New York Times, there was kind of like an unspoken rule that there was a lot to cover, and don't really bother with artists who haven't made something new. So like, the Black Keys are playing, should I cover that? It's like, well, do they have a record people care about? Or are they just doing their thing? Are they going to play classics? Because those words have already been thought and written. It's, unless there's a new take on it, like, go search out the things that introduce new ideas to our community, whatever, to a reader, to yourself. Mm-hmm. And I am not denying Justin Timberlake at the time wasn't interesting and amazing and a huge star, but like, aside from his whole public image that has taken a hit, like, he has not really made music that we've loved. He's not made movies that we loved, except for the Social Network. And like, of course, if someone was like, hey, let's go see JT and then let's go to Koreatown afterwards, I'm like, that's not a bad night. But why don't we just go to Koreatown and skip JT? Because like, what is he doing now? I don't need to hear Cry Me a River at this point in my life. I don't know. There's the economy of nostalgia that has a baked-in risk to it. If you're gonna spend the money and set up a J-Lo tour, you're projecting a sort of feeling that is hard to navigate.
And that's kind of what was funny about, say, like the Odeon hats or the nostalgic merch for, as I said, institutional restaurants or shops. It's like double time nostalgia. It's like, okay, we have nostalgia for this thing that's before this era that's now, except it's played out now. So now the nostalgia is too old for our current nostalgia.
Yeah, and you're selling agency. With these, I do a merch line called Schritz, and what we do is kind of like, it's about me and our buddy Pascal's memories and feelings and the things that we felt are forgotten, like artists that maybe have been passed over with the gaze of time, whatever, and it comes from an emotional place, but it's also about, I'm aware that it's about agency. And if you do a hat that is an old institution, like I did a Four Seasons Mark Rothko hat recently.
It sounds more like the glaze of time.
I'm glazing for the Four Seasons, let me tell you. But, or is it, what did they call Carl Anthony Towns? I don't know. Zesty. Am I zesty? Am I too zesty for glazing for the Four Seasons?
A lot of people are asking that. Yeah. That's one of the main debates about you. It's like,
my
are
zest
you
for the Four
zesty?
Seasons.
Are you too zesty to glaze the Four Seasons?
Yes. But like, can you wear it, right? Like, I remember trying to give someone our Knicks like Death shirts. The logo was based off of this old logo from the band Death, and they're like, "We love the tee. I'd like it for my archive. I can't wear it because I don't know Death." I'm like, "Oh, just Google it. Listen to some songs. You're fine." It's like, okay, maybe I will. I don't, culture has been flattened that way. Like, I don't have to go to someone's house and listen to the tapes, or go to a show. But it is a kind of way to create boundaries and gatekeep. And sometimes it's with positivity and sometimes it's with straight
I
skepticism.
remember wearing that shirt, and I was walking the street, saw someone who had a Death logo on one of their items of clothing. I forget if it was a jacket or a shirt.
Yeah.
And we sort of eyed each other, and I was like, dude, tell me your like top 5 hoodie mellows.
Right. I know. I mean, even with hats that just say basketball, I've tried to give those away to my friends, and they're like, we don't know basketball, so we can't wear that. I'm like, just wear it to protect your eyes from the sun. They're like, but I don't want to talk to anybody who might recognize it. Like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm like, fair enough, man. Basketball, third rail kind of topic as well.
Except not, though. It's a weird one.
It's borderline. It's tough, right? Because talking merch, no one wants to talk about basketball merch like I do.
Yeah, I mean, but then there's a huge group of people that do, right?
Oh, I'm not talking about population. Like, wrestling is one of the most popular things in America, right?
Oh, I'm talking about specifically the contingency of fans that's super into, say, like basketball merch. Like, I'm on a basketball group chat, and it's like, here's the topic du jour. We're talking about the satin jerseys from the early 2000s. And
Jesus Christ. I want to know more about this chat.
it's like the Magic ones. That was the best, actually. Thrift store special. Like the penny or whatever it was.
I'm so bad at texting casually, like checking in, having a conversation. Sometimes when you check in, you're like texting for half an hour. I've left all my chats. How many chats do you keep up with on your phone?
Like, really pay attention to?
Yeah. With groups.
No, I get that. I'd say 2.5.
It's nice, right? It's nice to have like a running discourse with your friends. Like, it feels comfortable. I like
Only one of them is not on silent mode.
I find it to be this kind of time vortex that I used to beat Sonic the Hedgehog on a timer. So I used to be like, I need to beat my all-time time now. And I would
You were
just
doing Sonic speedruns over there?
I was addicted to video games at one point in my life. And then I realized, like, I had been wasting all those hours when I could have just been like watching the NBA on NBC, like, and talking to other people. It's like, oh, I beat my Sonic time. Everyone would be like, that's cool. What was the time? I was like, Jesus Christ, right? But at least with these chats, like, it is a sort of friendship and connection that I think is cool. I just find it to be like one of the black holes of technology.
I could see that being the case. Speaking of, well, I mean, to me, it's like the one that is
What's
not
the one? Yeah.
muted is a basketball sign-up text thing.
Right. So this is work, kind of, like, because you're like, okay, I got 5 spots on Friday, right?
Yeah, I want to make sure I know who's coming and if someone's bailing on it. So it's like I don't want to have to go and look it up. I want to know that if it's 10 minutes before and someone hits me up, I'm like, shit, we might be one low. Right. But
Like,
yeah, most group chats stay on silent, and I think that's for everybody.
if you texted me, Caitlin Clark is being headhunted because she's white, I'd be like, this is an interesting conversation. If a chat starts that conversation with 10 people, I'm fucking out.
Well, sounds like we just started it, Andrew. Your girl, Caitlin Clark,
I'm a fan.
is being bullied. She is being targeted by jealous, petty WNBA players who don't understand that she is bringing incredible financial success to their league, and they are kicking the gift horse in the mouth. Is that what's going on? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, so she's been targeted in her in all of her games. She's being kind of muscled around, and there's been a lot of kind of broad discussions about race. Valid, totally valid. Everything's about race. Sports is not exempt from this. It's also about money, how the WNBA is going to sustain the popularity of this one player and kind of elevate itself to a different level. It's about the code of an NBA game, right? Like, you're a grizzled veteran. You've put in your dues. You get paid $60,000 a year. Oh, this tiny white girl is going to sun me? Not on my watch. And it's mostly about entertainment, right? It is what we're watching and what we're talking about afterwards. I think the WNBA is ecstatic that she is entering the arena of conversation and debate that we have over someone like Kyrie Irving. Like, is this racially motivated? What if she was black? What if she is bad? Are we giving her treatment that we're reserving for someone who looks like her? This is all incredible stuff.
Yeah, it's great.
It's great. She's just getting pushed around, but this stuff is alive now, right?
So, for some context, we spoke about Caitlin Clark for a little while. I think it was 2 weeks ago. And at that point, she'd played 5 games. First 2 were poor performances. And then her next 3, she was starting to play a lot better. And since then, I would not say it has been an upswing. It has been erratic. She's had a 30-point game, but then she went 1 of 10 last night. It's really up and down. And overall, just the breadth of her work right now has not been that strong. Her scoring efficiency is low. I think it's like 52, 53%.
A lot of turnovers.
And it's solely buoyed by the fact that she's roughly a 90% free throw shooter. You know, she's shooting like 29% or something from 3, which is very anomalous, seemingly, for such a fantastic shooter. And because she takes, 60% or higher of her shots from 3, her overall field goal percentage is in the low 30s. So it's not pretty in terms of her efficiency. And as you said, her turnovers are high. Even though she's probably within the league leaders, I would say, in assists, probably within the top 10, maybe even higher. But overall, yeah, spotty, some problems on both sides of the ball. Her shooting is just not there. For someone who is supposed to come in as this new Steph Curry, as a generational shooter, she just is not connected at the level that we are accustomed to seeing. So that's the context of where she is. But the bigger story is less even about her struggles, or maybe it's tied to that. Maybe let's give the people who are up in arms about her being bullied some credit for their agenda. Maybe they are huge believers in Caitlin Clark and are looking at her struggles and saying, it's because she's being bullied. It's because she's being targeted. It's because people are knocking her down and playing extra physical. And that's all due to her status as a superstar. I guess my response, even if that was true, would be, who gives a shit?
It is true. Who gives a shit? Yeah.
But why wouldn't she be targeted? She's one of the most lauded prospects in history. She was the leading scorer in the NCAA and leading passer. She is a superstar college athlete coming into the pros, lauded as the one who is going to take this league to the next level. Like, of course I'm going at her throat. Every competitive player would. If someone came to my run, a little Green Point run, and someone showed up like, this guy's hot shit, you're going at them. This is what you
Especially
do
if
on the
they were-
basketball court. It's fucking
They were
basketball.
short king, right? If it's like Brianna Stewart is the GOAT, the best college player of all time, but she's a bully. She's big. Caitlin Clark's small. Like, I'm not letting this person sun me, right? And this is just sports, and people get knocked over, and it's so amazing. It's like, well, this is footage of her talking smack, and this is footage of her committing an offensive foul. I'm like, yeah, it's a contact sport. I don't know. But the demonization of kind of like, and this is like sexism kind of veiled, right? The gatekeepers have a point, being like, you guys all talk about this in terms that like I am not loving. Like, there's a little accent in there that like is condescending a little bit, and
Like
whether
like
that
an
be
Irish accent.
like saying euro. It's like, you mean gyro? I'm like, isn't the right way to say euro? Like going to France and be like, bonjour. Not cool, I think. But and comparing her to Steph Curry, I do the same thing. But like, I can see why someone's like, that upsets me, you know? And she is all of these debates in one kind of package. And where I do find the most truth in discussing her is like, yo, she's struggling out there. Like, the pressure is crazy. She's gonna burn the fuck out. She's trying her best. Just eye test wise, the way she selects shots, her decisions, her movements, she's really good. She's a great player. I'm excited. Boston's kind of doesn't know how to pick and roll. I don't know what's going on there, but it kind of like deads a lot of actions for Caitlin Clark. But talking about X's and O's kind of doesn't do her service. This is like a really tricky thing, and it's much must-watch basketball, I think.
Look, there are a lot of vectors here. The caliber of talent she's playing against, just cartoonishly higher.
Yeah,
You're
the
going
WNBA
from-
is good.
It's good, but you're going from
Yeah.
a sophomore at Northwestern trying to guard you 40 feet from the basket
Yeah.
to a top 10 perimeter defender every game. Every game. There's only 12 teams. You're on one of them.
The Liberty
Everyone's
is a
top-
super team. Yeah.
Everyone you play, okay, cool. You're going against the Liberty. Here's who they're running at you.
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool. Did you play anyone like Laney last year? Like, no. Okay. This is every night. You're getting
Yeah.
someone like that. Like,
There's
you know,
12 teams in the
there's-
league. Yeah.
Exactly. So the caliber of play individually, team defensively, scheming, it's just so much higher. You know, and then the other parts about, you know, being a rookie, being with new teammates, you know, she was on a team that was built around her strengths in Iowa for 3 seasons. It was built around what she does, and what she could do was their emphasis. And there was a, you know, mutually beneficial operational scheme there, where her shooting ability was the reason they won, and vice versa, or them setting her up for those shots was the emphasis of the team. It's not, hasn't been calcified and for the Fever at this point. So there's things that need to be worked out, but ultimately, when you see this critique, it's not based on these things. It's not based on that. I'm talking about the people who are mad. Like, she's being targeted.
Like, everyone's mad. The people who are mad that she is being unfairly treated.
And then you have the people who are also kind of mad at her and like are reveling in her struggles. Of
course.
And which also is funny. I get it. I get it. This is the most hyped prospect, and she's out there going 1 of 10 and getting knocked around, and everyone's bitching and moaning about it. And there, as you said, there are racial components to this story, and there always have. Like, since her emergence, particularly against LSU and Angel Reese, there's always been a racial component to her story that she has not attempted to foster at all. She's just gone out there and tried to play ball, but it's happened regardless. I will say, though, people are just not aware that the WNBA is physical. Is that what's happening here?
Or basketball's a contact sport.
It's both of those things, right?
Yeah.
Like, the NBA is physical. People get hit. But the WNBA,
There's a lot of
Those ladies are scrappy, man. They are down there. They are throwing bows. They're throwing shoulders. They're diving on the floor. It is a much more terrestrial game than the men's in some ways.
Yeah, it's a war of attrition.
Really physical on the ground. It's like it's more about space that you can carve out by. It's not about going up and getting the ball because women just aren't leaping as high with 7'2" wingspans in the same way that men's players are on that level. But they are really, really territorial. It's about physicality and holding your ground and getting the ball, and it's really physical.
Yeah, and I think we understand that. We don't have to be like they're tough out there. Like, yes, we see that, and Carter.
I don't mean that we are explaining this to people. Yeah. I'm saying if you don't know women's ball and you haven't watched it and you're seeing this, you're like, why are they pushing around? But this is the sport.
And Carter's been kind of dismissed from teams for being like brutal. She's kind of bounced around. I think she was like a lottery pick. She's the one who shoved Caitlin Clark down. If Caitlin Clark doesn't go to the ground, we don't have this conversation. If she just loses her balance, we talk about something else. But Carter, I believe this is her third team. She did a stint in Europe, and no one likes her. She's just like an enforcer with a chip on her shoulder, which is delightful. And there was discussion well, if she was white and Caitlin Clark was black, do we talk about this through the same lens? I'm like, the transitive property doesn't quite work here because it's different people, it's different actions, and it's just a different scenario. I don't think you could just switch things like that. But it's amazing that Caitlin Clark is starting these conversations. And I don't know why. I kind of can guess why, men like us and people on ESPN or on the internet feel an ease in talking about something that is slightly more nuanced than the NBA.
Yeah, I think with the specific play you're talking about, there's refs out there.
Yeah, the refs should just call a flagrant or kick her out of the game, whatever.
Yeah, even if it's just a regular call, whatever. This isn't Caitlin Clark, in the wilderness, as it's being presented. She's in a WNBA game. There are rules and officials. They are bullying her. But what do you mean? Someone came up and shoved her? Who gives a shit? It's basketball. She didn't shove her that hard. Caitlin Clark is always flopping and diving anyway. And I don't even have a problem with that. But, I haven't seen Caitlin Clark getting, brutalized out there. She got shoved. It happens. It's the sport. She was trying to send a message. She got a foul for it. It is this is all part of the game.
But to your point before, of course they're targeting her.
Yeah.
We know what's going on. I think she is specifically being targeted. And I think she wears her heart on her sleeve, and that's why she's such an interesting athlete. But she seems like she's wearing down, and she's like, God damn it, I'm upset we lost. I'm upset I played bad. I don't want to talk about the fouls. That's just part of the game. I'm like, protect this player. Protect Stephon Marbury. Protect whoever. But, I think to the beginning of this conversation, yes, she's being targeted, and you can brush your shoulders off only for so long. Being bullied is it's hard being bullied, and I don't think it is something that I want to be this is just the game.
I don't know. I think coming in with her reputation, and I don't even forget the whole thing. She's raising the elevation of the game. They shouldn't. I forget that conversation. These are all individual people making individual decisions. I look at it as oh, this is someone who is hyper popular and viewed as saving this league that we've already created. So of course we're going hard. I just think the targeting thing is weird because I'm not saying with you. I'm saying she's their number one pick. She's the focal point of their offense. She's not physically that strong. That's what you're supposed to do. It's like saying they're bullying Trae Young when they try to get a switch and go at them. They're bullying Tyler Hero when they post him up. It's the sport.
I mean, you're talking about like physics, right? Because Trae Young is smaller, but there's certain athletes that have overcome this. Like LeBron was kind of targeted. He's big, like Jeremy Lin during Linsanity was like targeted a little bit. It's like, this guy ain't that good. Just get me on him. Sportsmanship. This is competition, right? I think what Caitlin Clark is doing, the conversation part of it, that's like, this is just part of the game. This is the physicality of it. I'm like, I'm not sure, because she is small. Cameron Brink is really relishing her moment of fame. She's really good, and she's in LA, right? She's not getting targeted in the same way. Angel Reese, her friend, like threw her down a couple times, but like Caitlin Clark is small and doesn't have the same expectations. Like Sabrina Ionescu wasn't targeted this way. I think this is something that is going to make Caitlin Clark's story interesting and noteworthy. Like, she's going to have to come out the other side of this emotionally or something. I don't know, but I perceive this as something that's fascinating, interesting, unique, and I kind of feel bad for her.
But when you say bullying, are you saying that she's just taking like physical abuse?
No,
in a way
it's psychological. I think it's the way she's treated in interviews, the way the media treats her, the way opposing teams treat her, maybe her own teammates. She's going to be fine. She's going to be a superstar, but she's on an island right now, and I kind of have sympathy for anybody who is like alone. It feels weird. I think it's great. It'll play out fine. I'm not like praying for her, but I'm like, oh, she's a pitcher out there who just gave up a grand slam, and she's in her head.
I have sympathy for her as a player and for being in a tough spot. I was mostly talking about the bullying as being like extreme on the court, and I'm like, I just think that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to take her out of it, and that's tough for a rookie. But she just came in with a ton of baggage. But I do think being interviewed constantly about it and
bad questions, weird interviews, like incessantly, it's a lot. It's like,
and even these conversations that are about race and bullying and being targeted, and no, she's actually not being targeted or whatever.
How dare you wear that? Like, you haven't earned the right to wear that. Like weird stuff. But
I'm saying none of that is something that probably feels good because she just wants to play ball.
This is what I mean, right? Like, this is the classic Kurt Cobain thing. It's like, ooh, I'm a genius at one thing, but not at the thing that would sustain this further. And the 90s were all about improbable celebrities. And some basketball players can, like, Breanna Stewart didn't have to answer these types of questions ever. Sabrina Ionescu was Kobe's protege and didn't have to really do this. I don't know what Beckers is going to experience next year, but Caitlin Clark is like getting like through the meat grinder a little bit.
No, I agree with that. And again, it's just her prominence and her success in college.
And the type of ball, right? Like, she's a fraud. These are just 3-pointers. Just like knock her down. I'm like, this is the Steph Curry thing again.
Can we quickly pivot from that just to cover it?
Yeah.
The Rasheed Wallace thing about the 04 Pistons beating the 2017 Warriors. Like, we don't need to belabor this part, but just on this same topic, right? Because in some ways, Caitlin Clark being knocked around is a victory for the boomerized point of view that threes are fraudulent, except that those are the same people in some cases who want to see her succeed. So hers is a little more convoluted.
It's fascinating, for sure.
But so Rasheed Wallace, I don't know whose podcast he was on. Maybe it was KG. I forget exactly where it was. But yeah, he was basically said, we would just knock them around. We just beat up on the Warriors and have our way with them. Got any thoughts on that, Andrew?
Rasheed Wallace is like pretty much my favorite player.
I know.
I love his swagger. I loved his game. But like, I went back and looked at the 2004-2005 Pistons championship run in the playoffs. percentages were pretty good, but their leading 3-point scorer at 1.6 makes a game was Chauncey Billups. And it goes down. Richard Hamilton, mid-range king. Dead ball era, joy of basketball. We relish in documenting this unique sliver of NBA history. What evolved out of that, arguably, were the small ball Warriors, who would demolish any team from that era, because they would. The whole premise of Draymond Green and that small ball team, which isn't really an era, it's a team, was baiting these unitaskers into believing that they were doing the things that they were good at. And Draymond Green versus whoever he was matched up against, would be matched up against, Rasheed Wallace or Ben Wallace, would trick them all game. I think it's not as interesting as I want it to be, because it's so apparent that Steph Curry would just bomb the shit out of these guys.
I was going to say, the timing on this is funny, because you can't even say the rules were different for the 04 Pistons. Since they changed the rules a season or two before that, all right, the dead ball era carried over into the Pistons, but the rule change actually happened before that season, if I remember correctly. Am I right on that?
Let's just say you were.
I like this thing. We should
Google's
just
broken,
kind of
so
go with Ben's right, you know?
Google is no longer an option. So.
I thought it happened before that, but I thought it was like 2001 when they changed those rules. It was actually a few years prior, but they were still the dying embers of the prior rules, where you just put a bunch of defenders on the court. You had a couple creators and you spaced out because people had to go there. Then they got rid of illegal defense. And for a couple of years, you had teams like the Spurs and the Pistons who had the lowest defensive rating in the history of the league, because the personnel had not caught up with the rule changes. And then this era ushered in the D'Antoni Suns and Steve Nash, and then really the modern game. So these were the final dead ball era teams, even though the rules had changed. So what I was getting around to was that since the rule change, I would argue that the Pistons were probably the championship team least equipped to even compete whatsoever with the Golden State Warriors. Like, not just that they would have lost, they were least equipped. Like, they shot 12 threes a game. They played at the 25th slowest pace in the NBA. They had Larry Brown, who is as regressive as coaches got. Talented team, loved them against the Lakers, was rooting for them. But they would have just been absolutely annihilated. They would have had no chance whatsoever. And this isn't even like we're talking about 5 years later. We're talking 15.
Yeah,
It's 13. Like two generations later, that Golden State Warriors team was second in defense. So was the Pistons. Proportionally to the people in the league, Golden State had the number one offense, second best defense. That Pistons team was like 20th in the league in offense or something like that. Anyway, insane take by Rasheed, but I respect it.
I love it, and they're friends, so it's all good. But transporting errors, it's too many mental jumps. It's like, well, if Billups took more threes, if Hamilton, who shot 385 in the playoffs, took more threes, they can match. It's like basketball's just better now. Math is just math, and the rules kind of made it more difficult for players like Steph Curry, and they still are nuclear weapons.
Right. What's funny about those ideas is that, well, they could have just played at a much faster tempo, and they could have just taken 32 threes instead of 12. Like, how?
Yeah.
How would they have done that? That's not
Larry
what they
Brown?
did.
The same Larry Brown we know?
What if they just played a completely different way?
Yeah, exactly.
And I know the socialization of basketball is a real thing. And yes, if you put those guys in the modern NBA for a few years, they would play more like that in systems that are more like that. But that's not who they were. That's not how they played.
Jordan would be a good 3-point shooter if he was tasked to. It's like, but he wasn't. Like Kobe
That's
Bryant
exactly.
wasn't a good 3-point shooter, but he would be. I'm like, then we're just like, it's fan fiction at that point.
As a very, very tiny aside back to the Caitlin Clark thing, one of the reasons I think she'll probably be okay is because, unlike, say, MJ, who could only shoot on the line that was a little bit closer, or some of those guys like, I don't know, DeRozan or Fultz, players who just really struggle to extend their range to, or even LaMarcus Aldridge, just so much better at long twos than threes. At least Caitlin Clark's shooting on the same line.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, we can't say, oh, well, they moved the line back. Maybe that's the issue. Same line. She's going to be able to shoot fine.
Yeah, she's going to be fine.
Anyway.
Imagine if they get Beckers. That's going to be fun. I hope they can win the lottery and get Beckers. It would be a shame. No disrespect to Indiana, which I constantly do, is disrespect Indiana. But
Fair.
I mean, I'm not sold on Boston, but Aaliyah Boston, but Beckers and Clark backcourt, like, that's fucking fun, man.
But are you sold on Boston?
The Celtics. Doesn't it feel like the NBA season ended like 2 weeks ago? And I'm not trying to be the grouch. I love basketball. I'm watching all these games, bro. But like when both conference finals series went 3-0, 0-3, it was kind of just like, do I like hockey? No. I love the Yankees. I'm going to watch some of their games. Am I going to go touch grass? Maybe so. It's like, oh, the finals haven't started yet. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's funny because they have to schedule the finals ahead of time for, I'm sure, advertising purposes and whatever. So with the Celtics series ending in 4 games and the Mavericks series ending in 5, there's been this just window of time. And yes, the WNBA is going on, and we're talking Caitlin Clark, and like that season is, already popping off. And there is basketball if you want to watch it. But as far as NBA heads go, it already does feel like we're done.
We're doing the off-season contracts. We're doing mock drafts. We're doing hypothetical trades, and Boston Twitter, Celtics Twitter is going off. But like it's the same stuff, so I'm not like as engaged. It's been going on forever. Mavs Twitter doesn't exist.
Right. I'm excited for this finals. I think it'll be fun. I obviously am rooting for my Celtics. I hope as a Boston day one you can get that chip.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to it. They're fun storylines. It doesn't have the veneer of an all-timer because you don't look at either of these teams and say they're that good. I know the Celtics record was fantastic, and Celtics and the BMM have been very vocal about how like this team needs to be respected more, and like why don't people believe in the Celtics? And it's like
this is the
whatever,
respect. Yeah. You guys are doing it.
But beyond all that kind of stuff, yeah, if they said, yeah, bad news, they're not actually going to play the finals. Like, all right.
Damn,
Okay,
that sucks.
cool. Well, that sucks. All right. Anyway, so what's up? Off-season drafts? Where are we going? Where are we going forward?
Yeah.
And I'm interested in it. And I like a lot of the teams. I like a lot of the players on the Mavs. I'm invested in it. But yeah, they said, we're just going to declare it a tie. Like, it's a little weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, are the
or
Sixers going to go and get Brandon Ingram? I hope not.
Or maybe there's no bridge from game to game, because maybe as soon as game 1 starts, I'll be like, this is crazy, this is great, this is insane. But the debate and bridge from the last Mavs game to game 1 of the finals, it's like, is Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum the best backcourt of all? I'm like, oh Jesus, we've litigated this. It's like Tatum's overrated, Tatum's a bum. I'm like, we've done this. It's like Tatum's actually top 3. I'm like, I can't do it again. I can't listen to Cry Me a River in 2024. Like, I need something else, and that something else is game 1. So hopefully we're gonna get like Kyrie, saging the arena again. But I don't know. I don't want to debate if Kyrie's a good or bad person or not. I don't want to be like, well, actually, Jaylen Brown is also a 5%er. Like, Groundhog Day, buddy.
Yeah, I don't see too many personal narratives with a lot of interesting angles outside of, say, oh, they're going against their former team. Porzingis was once thought to be the running mate of the Luka Doncic, and now it's Kyrie, who used to be the running mate of Tatum, and none of that's that interesting, really. But the other ones, the guys are either too young or don't matter enough in the grand scheme of things that a ring changes anything. If Tatum wins a ring, that doesn't make him a top 5 player. If Luka wins a ring, we already know he's an all-time great.
Right.
If Kyrie wins, he's already won a ring. If Porzingis wins, who cares?
I'm having trouble finding a villain. And obviously, as a New York fan, I'm not into Boston sports. So that's easy, right? But like, usually, you know, with to your point, the most celebrated or historical NBA finals, it was like LeBron versus Curry. It's like, oh, this is a class discussion, right? Like, this is about markets. This is about America. Yeah, I thought it was amazing. Jokic, European, like, is he a GOAT? Like, there was some sort of drama there. I love Luka. Tatum is good. They could both win, and like you were saying, like, okay, chalk one up for them. Are they better than Jokic? I don't think so. Are they better than any of the Warriors? No. Are they better than LeBron? No. But, you know, maybe next year, if one of those guys wins again and again, we can do it. But we're buying the groceries now.
Well, I think here's something to take into account. I haven't heard this take, and I don't think it's like a hot one. But if you go back and you look at the champions for, you know, recent history, Nuggets, Warriors, Bucks, Lakers, Raptors, Warriors, Cavs, Spurs, Heat, Mavericks, Lakers. And you take it back to the 2008 Celtics. Actually, no, they qualify, I believe. Spurs, Heat, Spurs, Detroit, whatever. Maybe it's the Pistons. That's 20 years of the championship team having an MVP on it. I think so. Oh, Kawhi didn't win MVP, so he'd be the exception. But that was also a weird year because Golden State got hurt. But and Kawhi was also, and Kawhi was like a top 3 player. He was ridiculous. But this is what I mean. There isn't a narrative here that someone has to prove something. It's an MVP. No, Luka hasn't won one yet. He probably will. He's up there.
Not with Jokic.
But I'm saying it's he's in the mix, right? I mean, he was he's in that category of kind of player. Yeah. But right, I'm saying that list was like, it's like Jokic and Curry and Giannis and LeBron.
Here comes Wemby, right?
And yeah, like if you look at all these guys, and these were proving grounds. Can the MVP prove that they can win a title? Can they prove that they aren't a fraud? Can they prove they aren't just a regular season player? None of these guys have that hardware leading into this. Doesn't mean you have to, but there just isn't a narrative arc or a show me what you got for anybody here. We know who all these guys are. It's kind of more of a obviously it's not an exhibition game. Whoever wins will be an NBA champion.
Simulation.
But there isn't really a storyline here with history teetering in the balance.
Yeah, we'll see. You know, I might change my mind after 2 games. I might be like, this is electric. This is incredible, you know?
I think it will be good.
Yeah.
I mostly mean like the superstructure to the finals doesn't, again, I think it's been 20 years other than the Kawhi one, where a team didn't have an MVP on it.
Yeah.
The winner didn't have an MVP or a former MVP.
And these are not like very popular players. Of course they're popular. We're talking about Luka and Tatum, you know, they're mentioned. But like, I kind of want to segue into the TNT and like the malaise that I feel, it may sound like I feel, it is not true. I'm very into watching these finals, but it's hard to bridge this week. There was news that TNT lost the rights to broadcast NBA games, which means the end of Inside the NBA with Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith, EJ, and Shaq, beloved. Back to NBC. Do you have?
Can I one question for clarity is would this be for next season or the
No,
one
no.
after? it?
TNT's intact, so we're gonna get an annoying victory lap season, and like what Luca said, like something will get worked out. I think there is popularity and money to be made with Charles Barkley and friends, so something will happen.
That's where I think where I land on it.
DraftKings, I don't know, whatever. But it's important to have the games, as ESPN has learned. You need the games. You can't make money without the games. So I don't know if it's going to be at Turner or what, but do you have thoughts on this?
I mean, I don't really watch inside the NBA that much. I think they've had some great moments. I love them, especially when they added Barkley, because as a Sixers fan, when they added him in the year 2000, I think
As
that
a
was really
Rockets
when
fan. Yeah.
as a Suns day one.
Yeah.
I think that was when it really started shifting into its modern era, and then Shaq came aboard. When I say modern era, like it's glory days.
After
Shaq, you know,
Magic,
it was,
right? Magic was in that seat for a while.
right. I think Barkley was when it became actually funny and weird and odd because of his character, that he would say outlandish stuff that.
And he's lovable, and EJ is lovable. Kenny Smith he's fine, but he's negligible here. He's the straight man, right?
Yes. And then Shaq came in 10 years later, and that's the current version of the show that I think, most younger people are familiar with, because at this point, that's been 15 years or close to it. So, Shaq is very much considered a part of the show in a way that he wasn't prior to that. But regardless, I haven't really loved it as much since Shaq got there. And maybe that's just my own fandom or just not loving the Shaq dynamic. But he's had some funny moments. Like he's an entertaining dude. I don't really mourn the show in that way, other than to your point that people like it, and it shouldn't necessarily fall victim to TV contracts. That if this show should exist and people want it to exist, then there could be a way to work that out, because that would suck if something that people loved was just sacrificed because a network didn't want to pony up the money to keep it.
Yeah.
Me, I don't know. I guess I'd rather them be on television than not. It doesn't hurt my feelings if like they're still around and kicking. That's cool.
And I consume media in the way of AM radio. These guys are my friends. Like I love listening to the Levitard Network for a decade, for hours. I feel like I know these guys, and I feel like I know TNT, and I have not enjoyed their show for a while because they seem gassed. They seem bored. Everything is a sham. No big man is as good as Shaq. There's not a bevy of jokes anymore. They're doing the arena tour 10 years too late. And I don't want J-Lo to go away, but like the TNT guys are something we're familiar with, and we enjoy the moral high ground. So it's easy to be like, Barkley says this league and this game is a sham. So everyone's fraudulent. And I'm with Barkley because I am morally and ethically perceptive. And I want the show to go away. And I say that because I really like the show. But I think the tenor when talking about the NBA is like, this is fraudulent. Michael Jordan gets brought up in a way that is hilarious and unique to the NBA. No sport, like NHL fans aren't like Sidney Crosby this, Gretzky that. And football, it's not like Brady. Brady's better than Mahomes, Like, there's a little bit of that, but not in the Jordan way. Baseball, same. And I think skepticism is an easy place for Barkley to lie, because he's not a shareholder in the NBA, and he's not in it for the pleasure of it. He gets to be a contrarian, which is fun and insightful. We need contrarians. But if you're a Michael Jordan fan, and if you think this era of the NBA is fraudulent because of rules, because of celebrity, because of player empowerment, then you're hearkening back to the NBC days with Marv Albert when he reigned on every Sunday. Jordan, Pippen, Horace Grant. That like was the bread and butter of the renaissance of the NBA on NBC with Bob Costas and Marv Albert. Don't you want it to go back to that? Because they were the authors of all the stories that we retell.
So there was a article called More Than Nostalgia, How NBC Thrived and ESPN Failed with the NBA. So TNT, less part of this discussion, but they talk about NBC setting up the games as if they were epic. And as you said, the voice of Marv Albert.
The sounds of John Tesh.
The idea, exactly, the idea that these guys were the best, that this was a treat, that you were about to watch something incredible unfold. And they would give you the storylines, they'd give you how this meant in a larger scale. Here are the stakes. This is Reggie Miller. This is Patrick Ewing. This is what we're playing for right now. Mm-hmm. And I think even though we're younger, and this is where nostalgia plays tricks on you, it felt great. Mm-hmm. It felt amazing. Here's the music. Here's the voice. Here's Marv. Like, holy shit. This is delightful. And I think that there's a coarsening, if you will, with the TNT guys. And that it's about their stories and their takes and their arguments. Oh, I said this team was going to win. I think this player is a bitch. And did he prove me right or wrong? Oh, he proved me wrong. What's he going to say to Shaq after having that big game? That's not fun.
Yeah. Imagine.
I don't like that shit.
Imagine Ahmad Rashad or Peter Vesey at halftime being like, Olajuwon sucks, man. Like, Dave Cowens would have had his, like Robert Parrish would have dominated him. We just sing the same songs of that thing, and I think to your point, the NBA and NBC was like electric because they were trying to build a brand. They're doing what the WNBA should be doing now, which is like creating mythologies for 10 players, one from each team. Excitement, big sounds. When you cut to TNT, it's just like, oh God, are we still here? Is everyone still there? And it becomes like grievance comedy, which I love. But this is why we complain more than we celebrate.
Look, I think part of it is holding up a mirror to the fans and social media and
definitely.
The ESPN's coverage is, I'm sure, reflective of what they're seeing and what they believe people want, which is arguing talking heads and hot takes and things like that. Sure. Like, we can't be naive about what the business model that's worked for sports broadcasting. But also, like, the point that this article made was that ESPN is running ads for ESPN. Their broadcasting is an ad for their talent.
Yeah,
they aren't necessarily advertising for the league. They aren't advocating for the NBA, for the sport of basketball. It's for their coverage, their people, their arguments. It's for ESPN. And the argument that this essay makes was that ESPN was an advocate for the NBA and the sport of basketball. And that's what hopefully they will do more of. And who's to say? Because the landscape has shifted. NBC may say, well, we know what people want. Arguing about hot takes. Who's a bitch? Yeah. Which team has been pussified? Let's get out there and say, you're not like MJ. You're not like LeBron in 5 years or however we're going to do this.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's like Pitchfork being like, best new music, LCD sound system. A day later, be like, Pitchfork Music Festival, headlined by LCD Sound System. And why wouldn't you? And maybe it's correct, right? Like, no one's claiming Michael Jordan is bad, but like, it's a different format that I'm looking forward to, because TNT kind of like, so 90s. They just are on air and they kind of like babble, and it's kind of like a choose your own adventure or Richard Linklater like Slacker type things. Like, Chuck, what's on your mind about this game? NBC can't do that because the broadcast on a major network like that has a different structure to it. I loved the Sundays where there was like 3 games back to back to back. That was incredible. The visuals were great. The music was great. It felt like an event, sort of like the NFL Sunday. But you make a good point, right? Like, we can't go back because technology is here, and everything we do with everything is a reflection on technology. And
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was going to just piggyback on that part where, like, the best time to watch basketball was that day. That was it.
Awesome. So awesome.
You know, when you were younger, like, you didn't have school. That was the day. Yeah. If a team was playing a night game and you were young on the West Coast or whatever, like, you just couldn't see it.
Or old. Yeah.
Or older. But yes. But in this era, right? It was like before League Pass. Even though League Pass actually launched in the 90s, just no one had it or it wasn't available. Isn't that kind of crazy? League Pass started in 96, I think.
The internet was around in the 80s.
Yeah, same thing. It was around, but no one had League Pass.
Yeah.
But, you know, in those early eras, like, you could watch it on WGN or you could watch it on MSG or what it was out, Yes, or whatever the other one was coming out in New York that showed Mets games. Or you had TBS and TNT showing some Hawks games and things like that.
WWOR in New York. PIX.
Yeah. But the weekend games, that was the one. Because they were the best games. They were back to back to back. They were at a time when you could watch them as a youth. So maybe we can't recapture that magic because the circumstances are different.
Oh, no, you can't do it
TV
again.
and watch 7-8 games every night. A back to back to back. Dude, you get a back to back to back every night. Pause.
How is that a pause? That had nothing to do with anything sexual. Back to back to back.
Every night. I don't know. I just felt like it needed a pause.
Does dinner need a pause? Like, I have dinner every night. Pause.
I don't know. I just saw that Cameron verse about Aunt Edwards. It got me a little nervous.
I mean, Cam and Ant have said insensitive things. So I see. We skipped over that topic. We'll revisit. So you were trying to tease the next perfect pod. I get to what you're doing.
You understand, yeah.
I do. I mean, I kind of want to like bring Bill Walton into this discussion a bit because he was such a powerful voice on NBC, and obviously he just died. And rest in peace to the god. The last time I saw him was at a Grateful Dead snowboarding event where he introduced like a Burton video. That was like kind of cool, and he just rambled on. And I'm not like a Bill Walton. I don't occupy his mind space, so it's hard for me to get there. And as a music fan, you know, Grateful Dead I accept now as one of the most amazing brands in American history, but were my enemy as a kid, being into whatever. I'm stupid. And then also, Bill Walton was kind of my enemy in NBA broadcasts because he would just say nothing. And this was before the internet. I'll elaborate on that. Before the internet, when I was a kid, I was like, this is incredible. I would like less of like he has that dog. Like, why is he better? He's doing that. Can you talk about that? Like, what's happening in this game? And Bill Walton be like, the heart of a champion. Sort of like when I'm on the road with the Dead. And I'm like, this guy's killing me and I can't scroll through Twitter because it's 1992.
I was never like a huge Walton fan either as a broadcaster. I mean, we're too young to remember him as a player.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even like in his late Celtic stage. Going back and looking at his career, he really didn't play very much. I mean, obviously he was I'm saying huge star in college, was an MVP in Portland, won a title, like a goated center, leading the league in blocks, up there in rebounds, scored a lot. He's just a great player. But yeah, by the time he was with the Celtics, and any even kernel of recognized memory that we have is of like a hobbled version of him. So I don't have any thoughts about him really as a player. But as an announcer, I always kind of liked him. I liked his voice. I thought he was more funny than anything else.
Sure, definitely.
And his shtick that I appreciated, because again, I was more of like Marv Albert was my preference. If we're talking about,
I mean,
basketball broadcasters, that's the GOAT.
get out of here. Yeah.
Yeah. Walton was more of a character and a shtick, but I did like the bit where he would say something like, John Stockton with the greatest pass in human civilization. Like those, that was funny. Like the mega hyperbole was a good little bit. I kind of enjoyed that.
Yeah, and
Robert Ory is the best inbound passer in the history of the modern world.
and maybe these characters are the things we remember. Like, we don't remember like how expensive something was. We remember the thing, right? And like maybe I'm grasping for something that I don't really want, which is like more information. Maybe I wanted the hyperbole. Rex Chapman, after Bill Walton died, was like, again, we have to use this as a lesson to give these guys their flowers, or give these people their flowers, because we loved him so much and listened to all these people talking about this man. I wish he could have heard it. Motherfucker, he's been hearing this for 2 decades. He's been the most celebrated dude in sports for a generation. Like, him on NBC in the 90s was his flowers, because it was like, Bill, you're incredible. Let's get back to the game. He's like, no, let's not get back to the game. And I'm like, oh, this is a celebration of this wonderful man. And I'm as scared of death as anybody. It terrifies me, so I'm like, respect it. Oh, rest in peace. Like, I'm terrified of it. But like, he lived an amazing life. He got his flowers. Incredible dude.
Yeah, I mean, look, 71 is not old, so he did not live a particularly long life, but he lived a full one.
Yeah.
Hard to say. Anyone who's in like the Hall of Fame didn't get their flowers.
Bill Walton got his flowers.
If only we had recognized him while he was here. Motherfucker.
I know, seriously.
You're in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. I got mad at Rex Chapman. I was like, you asshole.
You were on TV for years.
Yeah.
I mean, the NBA was letting him ramble over games on a separate feed, like this season, with a bunch of Grateful Dead logos and iconography surrounding the screen. You couldn't even see the game. It was just Bill Walton.
He was a VIP at all the Dead shows. They loved him. He was on stage. It got me thinking of like, who deserves their flowers?
Yeah, but Andrew, if Bill knew that he was loved,
how much John Mayer loved him. Yeah.
Maybe he'd still be here.
Yeah.
If Obama had tweeted about him while he was alive, perhaps he wouldn't have succumbed to cancer in the same way.
Look at that basketball player on stage for a jam band show in a stadium and everyone cheering him. I wish he would get his flowers. Who would you give flowers now to? I was like, yo, I know I killed Danny Ainge by accident. I'm not gonna kill Phil Jackson. But someone should say some words for that man, because he's disappeared, and I don't want to prematurely diagnose him as a doctor, but like, let him know how great he was now, I think.
Wow. It's that meme with the Reaper going door to door. Danny Ainge, now Phil Jackson.
Who you got? Who you gonna give?
And that Reaper is you and several friends inside of a long shroud holding your what do they call it? A scythe?
Sith? I don't know.
Sith? Scythe.
But Phil Jackson was probably the greatest coach of all time.
Yeah, will someone give this guy his flowers?
I mean, he's not like when the Lakers won the most difficult championship of all time, there was like no mention of him. Jeannie Buss used to be engaged to him. The tenure in New York is an asterisk. Like, that was a disaster, but that was his flowers, I guess. But are there any people like, can we not give Ben Simmons his flowers? He was a 3-time All-NBA player. Are we afraid of the milkshake?
One-time NBA, 3-time All-Star.
Oh, my bad. Yes.
Two-time All-Defense.
Yeah.
I mean, he got his flowers. He just needs to come back and play some more. But
did he get
skeptical.
his flowers? Milkshake does.
No,
Yeah.
he's wildly mocked. I would say, who deserves their flowers?
In any world. Doesn't
No, I
have
wanna
to be a
stick to-
baller. Oh,
I
basketball.
want to stick to basketball, though. I like sticking to basketball. Who deserves their flowers? Doc Rivers deserves his flowers.
Well, like
You
Kyrie,
know,
Kyrie Irving.
He won a championship.
Kyrie Irving kind of got his flowers last month, but they're taking them back, right? And like, I mean, Bill Walton's views about the conflict in the Middle East right now are complicated, and someone brought it up on Twitter, and everyone's like, "No, we don't want to talk about that because we're doing a thing. We love him." And like, right.
I don't even know what his views are on that.
I think he's pro-Israel, and which is fine. I mean, times have changed. We didn't ask him last week how he felt. Maybe we did, and I missed it. I don't know, but I think he was a pro-Israel guy. If I'm not mistaken, I don't want to misspeak for him, but like, okay, if you're Brandon Roy, did you get your flowers?
Brandon Roy was actually one that I was thinking of. Maybe it's just our Portland chat.
I don't want to sleep through this discussion, but if we mention any more Portland player, is Scoot Henderson? Should we give him his flowers now? I mean, what are flowers?
I think
It
everyone.
pisses me off.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't really. I don't know if anybody deserves their flowers. I mean,
or everybody.
I mean, everyone deserves their flowers, but I feel like it has to be. Doesn't have to be before like die, right? I mean, isn't it? That's the thing. Like, you got to give it to them before they die. So it's like you got some time. Like Tracy McGrady deserves his flowers, but it's like, right? But like,
But
before
when is he gonna
dies.
die? Right? Like, you just killed Tracy McGrady, and like, I think he's gonna live a long and healthy life. But this is you killing him prematurely in 2024.
So it's the Reaper. Now the third door is
Tracy McGrady.
Tracy McGrady.
Like, I have issues with the idea of flowers every time someone dies. Because, like, we should have celebrated them. Like, but in what capacity? Do you mean, like, on Twitter? Or do you mean, like, in real life? Should we have done the Tom Brady roast of him? Bill Walton's not famous enough for a roast. And I was thinking, like, the TNT crew should rebrand and just do NBA roasts, like, 4 times a year. And that would be their best use because they're just haters, right?
I mean, I think you got to have the dynamic here of some haters. You got to have haters, as French Montana wisely said, nobly said. But you can't have a whole show of haters. You got to have a mix.
Well, EJ's not a hater. And Barkley,
No, but
like,
they have
in
two.
real
They have
life.
two.
Right.
I know they have two haters.
They have
And they're
two bona fide haters.
It's too much.
Is two haters too much? Maybe. What if it was Bill Hader?
But then you get in the issue where one person's hating is just their shtick, so it's kind of predictable.
Well, they would have to hate different things. They can't hate the same thing.
Yeah, that's true. They need to diversify the hate.
Like, Shaq could hate Dwight Howard, and Barkley could hate Shaq. That works.
Yeah, that's fair. So you can hate Bill Walton, and
I
I
don't
can
hate Bill
love his hyperbole,
Right.
and you can be dancing on his grave, and I can be giving him his flowers.
He was dancing, a dancing bear on the stage of the dead. I don't know, man. It's like there's so many heroes of mine who are like old. Like, I like Bob Costas. I know he's controversial now because, like, talk about hyperbole, and he ventured into politics, which is a no-no. But I like wanting to celebrate him. If they announced that he would be leading the NBA broadcast on NBC, I'd be like, good. That sounds fine. Pair him with someone else.
What did Bob Costas do again?
I think either he took a stance about the Middle East years ago, before the Gazan conflict, disaster, tragedy. He, I believe, said
I thought he
something.
was just kind of like he was just kind of anti-Trump, right?
I think it was the GOP had turned on him, and then he got pink-eyed during Olympics broadcast, and he looked like the evil emperor.
I always kind of like Bob Costas. I never trusted him because of his height.
The Caitlin Clark of NBC broadcasters, as they say. Yo, if Caitlin Clark was
But
bigger,
he did go to Syracuse, so he does have proximity to garbage plates that I do respect. But that's also probably why he's so susceptible to pink eye.
he keeps a Mickey Mantle card in his wallet. That's like the lamest thing. Like keeping, like what if I had a Jeremy Lin card in my rubber band full of credit cards? Like what the? You just look at that card. It's like this is a sick ass card.
That's the true third rail. Carrying around a baseball card of your hero with you at all times.
It's
Although,
yeah.
if you had like an Iverson card on you, that'd
No,
be kind of cool.
oh my gosh. Well, like it's an
Yeah,
amalgamation
would-
of third rails, right?
Yeah, would that be lame? If I'm like, yeah, it's my credit card, my Allen Iverson Rook.
It's like I have a picture in my wallet, and it's like it's not of my kids. Like, oh, thank God, because that's a third rail conversation. It's like it's of Matt Geiger. You'd be like, oh, zzz. Guide dog.
Is that Ron Baker? Why? I don't know. To me, he's family.
Yo, Discount Double Check is having like a content resurgence, man. Novocaine is
yeah,
back.
I was gonna say let's talk about that, and we can skip the Cam and Aunt Randolph pausery.
You pause it every
Ant
night.
Edwards, Ant Edwards, excuse me, not Anthony Randolph. But Anthony Randolph is actually a good example here. Now that there's sort of the TikTok trend and now it's a joke, but it's also kind of fun, where people are putting together clips of the highlights from really marginal NBA players, with the idea that anyone who's in the NBA for any duration of time, no matter how short for the most part, has like good highlights because they're extremely good at basketball. So people will be like, Will Bynum was different. And you'll see a clip and it's like, maybe he was different. It's Will Bynum, 6 feet tall, jamming on people. You're like,
I especially
why?
like the Quincy AC one. That was fire.
Yeah, that was a good one too. It's like, and you're like,
Goat
wait,
ball
these guys
player.
actually were good.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yes. I mean, editing is amazing. I don't like reality television because the editing does too much heavy lifting. I'm just like, God damn, they can make me believe anything just through a jump cut. But yeah, I love Novocaine quite a bit, and he was a colorful guy. But like, God, this episode I'm just going back to like, when is it time for historians to take over? Like, we're retelling the Discount Double Check mythology in 2024. Like, this seems weird. Like, no one really cares. But is it that time of day?
Is this lorecore?
Is it lorecore? What time zone are we in? Did you just fly in from Japan? Are you
Am
in
I
the
at a women's
future? Yeah.
wrestling event in the like June 5th, June 7th? I don't even know where I am or what time it is or who I am.
Yeah. Is Caitlin Clark already a 4-time MVP?
Am I doing a Sonic speed run?
Is Luka Doncic body positive?
Is this whole podcast too zesty?
It is not zesty. It is perfect.
Cookies.
I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.